Maybe you're eating less, training harder, and doing everything right, but your belly still refuses to budge. At that point, most people blame themselves. They think they need more discipline, more cardio, or less food. But sometimes the problem is not that your body is lazy, it is that your body feels under threat. When stress stays high, your system shifts. Fat burning gets harder, blood sugar gets less stable, and deep belly fat becomes much more likely to stick around. So if your stomach seems like the last place willing to change, there may be a reason for that. Because stubborn belly fat is not always a calorie problem. Sometimes it is a stress problem. Let's start with visceral fat, because it is not the same as the fat under your skin. This is the deeper fat stored around your organs, and it is much more tied to stress than most people realize. It is not just sitting there. It reacts to the signals your body sends every day. One of the biggest signals is cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. When stress stays high from poor sleep, undereating, overtraining, or constant mental pressure, visceral fat tends to become much more stubborn. And once that starts, the pattern can feed itself. Stress from poor sleep, undereating, overtraining, or daily pressure pushes cortisol higher. That makes visceral fat more likely to build through the midsection. As that deeper fat grows, it can release inflammatory compounds that put even more strain on the stress system. So what you get is a loop: more stress, more visceral fat, more inflammation, and more resistance to fat loss. That is why someone can look relatively lean but still carry stubborn fat through the midsection. The body may not be in fat burning mode, it may be in defense mode. And in that state, stored fat, especially around the midsection, becomes much harder to let go of. The insulin trap. This is where insulin makes the problem worse. Many people assume that if they cut carbs or skip sugar, insulin should stay low and fat burning should be easy. But stress changes that. When cortisol rises, it tells the liver to release glucose into the bloodstream. Then insulin rises to deal with that glucose. So even if you have not eaten, your body can still be creating the exact hormonal conditions that make stored fat harder to access. That is why some people barely eat, fast, or do keto, and still struggle to lose belly fat. The problem is not just food, it is the stress signal attached to the whole system. When the body reads danger, fat loss gets harder. Here is the twist. Some habits that look healthy can quietly make this worse. They look disciplined, but in the wrong body and under the wrong conditions, they can feed the same stress chemistry that keeps visceral fat in place. One of the biggest is chronic cardio. The endurance paradox. People are told that if they want to lose weight, they should move more, sweat more, and stay on the machine longer. So they run for an hour, live on the elliptical, or grind through moderate cardio every day. It feels effective because it is tiring, but fatigue is not the same as progress. What matters is not just how many calories the workout burns, it is the signal it sends. Repeated moderate intensity cardio without enough recovery can look to the body like ongoing strain. Cortisol stays elevated to keep you going, and over time, the bill comes due. One of the first things you lose is muscle. Cortisol is catabolic, which means it helps break tissue down for fuel. So the very thing that helps keep your metabolism high starts shrinking. Less muscle means fewer calories burned at rest, while the hormonal environment becomes even friendlier to visceral fat. That is the endurance paradox. The more some people push with chronic cardio, the more they reinforce the exact chemistry that keeps belly fat hanging on. The second trap is aggressive fasting on top of an already high-stress life. Fasting can be useful, but only when the body has enough capacity to handle it. If you are already running on poor sleep, mental stress, and under-recovery, adding 20-hour fasts or full-day fasts can stop acting like a tool and start acting like another threat. The body does not always read fasting as healing. Sometimes it reads it as scarcity. When that happens, cortisol rises, energy drops, training suffers, and the body becomes even more protective of stored fat, especially through the middle. This is where people get stuck. They assume the answer is to fast longer, eat less, and push harder. But if fasting is driving stress high enough to raise cortisol and disrupt the very environment needed for fat loss, then the strategy is backfiring. You are not creating a fat-burning state. You are creating a defended one. The third trap is the middle of the night wake up, the 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning jolt that many people dismiss as just bad sleep. But sometimes it is more than that. It can be a stress signal. You fall asleep, exhausted, then suddenly wake up wide alert. Your mind starts racing, your body feels switched on, and getting back to sleep becomes a battle. In some cases, that happens because the brain senses instability during the night. If blood sugar is shaky or stress hormones are already high, the brain can treat that as a threat. Then the alarm goes off. Adrenaline rises, cortisol rises, and the liver releases more glucose to keep the brain supplied with fuel. That stress surge is what pulls you out of sleep, and that matters because it keeps the body in defense mode. You lose deep, restorative sleep, recovery suffers, and by morning you feel less restored and more pushed toward fat storage. So this is where the solution begins. You do not fix it by pushing harder, eating less, or trying to force your body into submission. You fix it by sending a different message. The threat is over. The body needs signals of safety before it will stop defending that abdominal reserve. It needs to know that fuel is available, recovery is possible, and stress is no longer in charge. The first shift is movement. Start using exercise as regulation, not punishment. One of the most underrated fat loss tools is not a brutal workout. It is a brisk 10 to 15 minute walk after a meal. After you eat, blood glucose rises. Normally, insulin has to do most of the work of clearing it, but contracting muscle can pull glucose out of the blood more efficiently. That is why a 10 to 15 minute walk after eating works so well. It helps lower the glucose spike, reduces how much insulin the body needs, supports digestion, and keeps the system steadier after meals. Less glucose volatility, less insulin demand, and less pressure toward fat storage. The second shift is stabilizing the night. If you keep waking up around 2 or 3 in the morning, the goal is to make that alarm less likely to happen. For some people, that means not going to bed underfueled. That is why some people use a small bedtime safety signal, like a teaspoon of honey, sometimes with a pinch of salt. Not a snack or a full meal, just a small amount to avoid going into the night in a depleted state. The idea is that a little quick carbohydrate may help keep the night more stable and reduce the chance of a stress response. If sleep stays deeper, recovery improves, and the body is less likely to remain in a high-stress state. The third shift is changing the kind of intensity you use. The answer is not endless jogging, but that does not mean avoiding hard effort. 1 or 2 short sessions of real high-intensity work can send a better signal than long, draining cardio. Short sprints, hard bike intervals, or brief explosive efforts with full rest tell the body that power, muscle, and performance still matter. Done sparingly, they create a stronger anabolic signal without the same chronic stress pattern of endurance training. Less time, more quality, more recovery. If you fast, the eating window still has to nourish you. You cannot go most of the day without food, then break the fast with a small, low-protein meal and expect the body to feel safe. The body needs enough raw material to repair, preserve muscle, and stay stable. That is why protein matters so much. It supports recovery, helps retain muscle, and signals that resources are available. If your meals do not make your body feel recovered, your fasting strategy may be too aggressive for the season you're in. In that case, a shorter fast and a wider eating window may work better than pushing deeper into restriction. Your physiology is shaped by more than food and exercise. It also responds to signals of safety and connection. If cortisol signals danger, oxytocin signals safety. It is tied to bonding, trust, warmth, and calm. That is why gratitude, affection, and connection matter. They are not just emotions, they can help shift the body out of a high-stress state. And that matters because a calmer nervous system supports a calmer metabolism. Even 1 minute of genuine gratitude before a meal or before bed can help shift the state you bring into eating or sleep. These are not magic tricks, they are nervous system signals. At that point, the problem is not just belly fat. It is a body stuck in a high-stress state. Cortisol keeps sounding the alarm, insulin keeps making stored fuel harder to access, and visceral fat keeps acting like protected reserve. The fix is to change the signal. Use strategic movement instead of draining cardio. Use nutrition that supports recovery instead of underfed fasting. Protect sleep so the body no longer has to wake itself up at night. Use simple tools like post-meal walks, enough protein, and calming practices to lower stress instead of adding to it. That is how the loop starts to break. As the body feels safer, inflammation drops, sleep improves, energy steadies, and fat loss becomes easier. Not because of a hack, but because you stopped fighting your biology and started changing the signals behind it. If this hit home for you, drop a comment below. And if you want more videos that break down the real biology behind stubborn fat loss, make sure to subscribe.